From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. The arrival of spring means it's time for homeowners to think about their yards. And a growing number of home gardeners are turning to drought-tolerant plantings. Think yucca, milkweed, and yarrow. For years, many homeowners associations in Colorado didn't make it easy to install xeric landscaping or water-saving tools like rain barrels. But homeowners, state law is on your side. In recent years, Colorado legislators have passed a handful of laws that make it easier for homeowners to incorporate water-efficient landscaping without running afoul of their HOA bylaws. So today, we're talking about when and how to push back if your HOA doesn't like your approach to landscaping. Deryn Davidson is the statewide sustainable landscape specialist with Colorado State University Extension. She consulted with legislators about some of these laws over the past decade and talked with me about why they were necessary.
We live in the arid West. We do have a lot of rivers and streams, but we also have a high population, and we need that water for cooking and bathing. And so we can still have beautiful landscapes, but we don't have to be putting all of that potable water on the landscapes.
Well, let's get to some of these laws here. You consulted with lawmakers on some of these when they were being crafted. Why was it necessary to write landscaping laws that protect homeowners against their own HOAs?
Yeah, so I like to point out that in gardening and doing horticulture in Colorado, it's sort of the right thing to do to be conscientious about our resource use. But sometimes our cities and states decide that they're going to get involved and actually create these laws. And the state wanted to make sure that no one was limited in the plant palette that they could use, because there is this misconception about xeriscaping. And so some HOAs want a very particular aesthetic look, and it was counter to this resource conservation piece that we're trying for with water conservation. So the state enacted a bill that said that HOAs could not restrict or prohibit people from doing xeriscapes.
And so that's the law passed in 2019 that says HOAs can't ban xeriscaping or drought-tolerant landscaping. Why was that law needed?
Well, because people were getting really interested in converting their landscapes and doing xeriscape. And some HOAs were pushing back and saying that, in fact, no, their residents could not do xeriscaping because essentially they didn't like the look and they were concerned that it would be messy and sort of that xeriscape look.
Okay, and then in 2023, lawmakers passed a bill that took this to the next level. Not only could HOAs not ban xeriscaping, HOAs now have to offer several pre-approved water-wise garden designs. Why was that addition important?
Yeah, that addition is important because it actually gives some guidance. So with this initial concern about the aesthetics, with the 2023 law stating that HOAs have to provide these pre-approved designs, it sort of takes that guesswork out of it.
Now, that law also made it easier for homeowners who want vegetable gardens. Briefly, what changes did it make for aspiring backyard food growers?
Yeah, so that law also says that HOAs cannot prohibit veggie gardens anywhere. So some people are transitioning their front yards into vegetable gardens, not just having them hidden kind of in the back. So it states that they can be in the front, back, or side yard of a unit owner's property.
So had HOAs been cracking down on veggie gardens?
You know, a lot of HOAs crack down on a lot of stuff. So, yeah, I think, the sort of general consensus in where the pushback was anything from sort of that traditional lawn with some shrubs and tree kind of very tidy look in the front yard. Yeah. And that is really changing. And I think that even HOAs, people on the landscape boards of HOAs are starting to see the benefit of having these different landscapes.
You know, Deryn, there's a viewpoint out there that xeriscaping and native plants are less beautiful than a traditional bluegrass lawn. What would you say to a local HOA board who thinks water-wise landscaping makes the neighborhood less attractive?
Well, this is a hard one. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But I do like to tell people that, gardening is so much fun. You can bring out your aesthetic and your personality, and you can also celebrate your sense of place. So many people want to move to Colorado because of the natural beauty.
Mm.
But why do we want to just go into the mountains or go to the national parks or go into our open spaces to enjoy that beauty when we can actually have that same beautiful plant palette and landscape in our yards?
Let's switch gears here and talk about rain barrels. They were basically illegal to use in Colorado up until 2016. I find it kind of mind-blowing to realize it was not legal to harvest the water that fell from the sky. What were the arguments against homeowners having rain barrels?
Yeah, this is a complicated one. So Colorado is a water rights state, and we have a water Congress, water lawyers, and water law. Very complicated.
Yes.
And essentially, with water rights, all of the water that falls as precipitation naturally, once it hits the ground, is owned by somebody else. So that water makes it back into our watershed, into streams, rivers, and lakes. And then that water can be drawn off to use for farming, ranching, mining, etc.
Right.
And so if a homeowner moves into a new house and they want to capture some of that rainwater, essentially, in a very simplistic explanation, they are stealing that water from the water rights holder.
Wow. What changed lawmakers' minds then about this? Because, you're right, water law is very old and established here in Colorado.
Yeah, so there had been a lot of interest in rainwater harvesting and people being able to capture it in rain barrels. CSU actually did a study and found that there wouldn't be a negative impact on downstream users if we limited the amount of water that people could capture. So what the law states is that a homeowner can have up to 110 gallons in rain barrels at any given time. That works out really nicely because most residential rain barrels are 55 gallons. So if you have two of those, that's 110 gallons. You can use that on your landscape, and then it's still going to make its way back into the watershed eventually.
Before we go, I think it's worth mentioning one more law that gives homeowners financial assistance from the state if they want to replace their lawn with something that's more water-wise. How does the turf replacement program work?
Yeah, so the turf replacement program passed a year or so ago, and that allocated $2 billion to water providers to distribute amongst their customers, essentially. And so if people wanted to voluntarily remove their turf, they could receive rebates to re-landscape their yards.
Okay.
And, I think it's been really positive. So if people are curious about that, if there is any money still to go around, it's something that they do directly through their water providers.
And just checking, can my overbearing HOA stop me from replacing my lawn?
They should not be able to stop you from replacing your lawn.
They might have some words for me if it's a muddy mess, though, because I didn't have a plan.
That's right. And they should be providing you with those 3 pre-approved plans. So there you go. You've got your design options.
Deryn Davidson with CSU Extension, talking about laws that help you fight back if your HOA hassles you about water-wise landscaping. We'll have links to more on this topic in our show notes and at KUNC.org. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thank you so much for listening.